Okay, so in this video, we're gonna talk about how to do some selective masking, specifically using blurs. So here is a photograph of a runner, and we're gonna learn how to give it a little bit more sense of motion by doing some faking with the motion blur filter in Photoshop. So how are we gonna start? Find a candidate for this blur. If you're gonna do a motion blur, then something that like would be in motion, right, would be more appropriate. Don't choose like a Greek statue that wouldn't be moving, unless you're like, I don't know, trying to like really make it obvious that it's fake. I don't know, but I wouldn't choose, choose something that looks like it should be in motion anyway. So this was just snapped. Another one I'm gonna do is this car image here. All right, so you open your image, and then the first step is to duplicate your image. So duplicate by hitting Control J, so that way you have a second copy of your image. And on this second copy, I'm gonna go ahead and rename it Blur. You don't need to rename it, but I'm just gonna rename it for clarity in the video. All right, so I've got my motion blur, I've got my original, and then I actually had copied and pasted this, which is why I have a background layer. I'm just gonna throw that one away. All right, so there's my original and my motion blur. All right, to get to the blurs, and this applies for any of the blurs that you're gonna do, the same process. So you're gonna go to Filter, Blur. All right, and there's actually two sets of blurs. There's blur, and there's also some stuff under Blur Gallery. Blur Gallery are slightly newer Photoshop tools. Path Blur, if you want to do a blur that's not just left to right, up and down. Path blur is what you want to explore. There's spin blur. I mean, all sorts of things that you can get to. Right here, there's motion blur, which is what I'm going to be using today. Another really useful one is the lens blur. So we'll look at that probably in another class period. And then radial blur, if you want to create a sense of motion, like zooming in, zooming out, that's when you would use radial blur. But for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and use motion, which is gonna give me left to right, up and down. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit motion blur. It's gonna open a dialog box. You wanna make sure that you're zoomed out of your picture enough that you can see, right? If you're all the way here, make sure you zoom out. So Control minus or Control plus. Okay, you can also zoom in and out over here on your little preview screen. If you do not see the preview, it's because this box is not checked. So make sure you check preview. And then there's a slider, so you can go ahead and change the slider. If you go all the way to the right, okay, that basically blurs this thing into oblivion. And if you go all, to the left, it's way less blur, right? So barely blurred. So how much you use this slider is going to depend on your specific picture. I'm going to go a little extra just to make it really obvious for the video, okay? You can also change your angle. So in this scenario, left to right looks like a good blur because that's the direction that he would be running. You can also spin this around, so if you need to do up and down, like if you want to make it look like something's falling, there's diagonal, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can go ahead and set the angle right here. And I'm just going to leave mine at 0. Okay, and when you like it, you're going to hit OK. All right, so I want the subject to not be blurred, right? I want there to still be an area of focus on my runner. And basically we're faking a technique called panning, where you follow your subject with the camera. And we'll talk more about that later. But you do want your subject to be in focus. So I think an easy way to do that is to just first turn this motion layer down. So I'm going to knock that opacity down so I can see like where the edges of my original subject are. So I haven't gone to 0, right? I'm just going kind of like partway through so I can see my subject. All right, and now I'm gonna go ahead and apply my layer mask. So my layer mask is down here, and I'm again on my blur. I'm gonna apply a layer mask, and for sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna go ahead and use the brush to do my masking. So you can see that white on a layer mask means it shows it. I'm gonna use black to hide portions of this layer. Basically, I'm going to cut a hole in this layer to show the original runner. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush. B is my brush. You can choose if you want to use a soft or a hard one. I usually lean towards soft. I'm going to go ahead and bump my opacity up to 100 because I know there's certain portions of this image that I definitely want like 100% clear. And then later I'll probably adjust my brush down, and then just make sure you're on the default black and white. Don't just click here and hope that you select black, okay? You're just gonna hit D on your keyboard and that gives you default black and white, and then you can hit X to toggle between the two. So that's D for default black and white, X to toggle between them. I have black. Okay, I've got my brush. To change your brush size, remember it's the brackets on your keyboard, the left and right bracket. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start painting over my subject, and as you can see, as I paint over here on the layer mask, I know this is really tiny, but anywhere I have painted with black, right? It's basically cutting a hole in this mask and showing me the nice crisp picture below. All right, as you're masking, if you're not like completely sure what you have masked, you can always hit the backslash button and it will show you a picture of your mask. So some people like working it like with red. If you're working with a red subject, then it's a little tricky. Like his red t-shirt, I can't really tell. But this way you can tell exactly what you've masked. And I'm not gonna spend forever doing this, because again, this is a demo. We do have tablets if you want. If you wanna get really precise, don't forget you can always zoom in and out. But again, for this demo, I'm just gonna do super quick. All right, so I've got my subject. I'm gonna turn the backslash off. And now I'm gonna go ahead and turn this layer back up to 100%. Okay, so you can see. Now this area here looks a little bit wonky. So I think I'm gonna actually go back to the layer mask, make sure you're on your mask, not your picture. You don't wanna paint black on your picture. Okay, and I'm gonna get rid of, that's like a little bit too much. This is looking a little too cheesy and fake. So I'm gonna drop my opacity down a little bit, and I'm gonna just get rid of some of that in this front portion because I want that edge to be nice and sharp. Okay, and again, I'm just painting over. And if you mess up, let's say you accidentally, I don't know, you get rid of too much blur over here. We'll just pretend that I got rid of way too much blur over here. That's okay, I can use my white paintbrush to put it back in. All right, so I got rid of a little bit too much, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that back in. I do want that area blurred. Okay, so on and so forth. And maybe I don't want too much of this edge as well. All right, sometimes with the blurs, people also decide to not leave this layer at 100%. Maybe they want like a little bit of what's underneath to show. You can dial this down to whatever, you know, is looking good for you. But we definitely have created now a sense of motion. So we'll go ahead and look at the before and after. And you can, of course, proceed to do any other edits that you would normally do, like contrast and brightness, right? So I can still play with my, I'm gonna go ahead and open curves here. I can still, you know, go ahead and tweak the photo like I normally would. I can still color correct and do all those things on top as well. Maybe I'll do a color lookup and I don't know, use this Kodak recoloring. Hooray, I'm happy with it. Okay, and again, window, I'm gonna take a snapshot with my history. So this is where I ended up, and then this is where we started. Okay, and then we'll do another one here. So again, this is the starting image. So Control J to duplicate the layer. Then I'm gonna go ahead and go filter, blur. Again, I'm gonna do motion blur for this scenario. Motion blur, again, you can choose the amount that you want to do this motion blur, like how much do you really want to blur? It's gonna depend on your image. You're gonna hit OK. And then I like to just turn this layer down. It doesn't matter if you add the mask now or before or after you turn the opacity down. I'll go ahead and add the mask now, and then I'll turn it down. So that way I can see where my car is supposed to be. I'm gonna get my B, my paintbrush. B is the brush. Okay, I'm gonna set it to 100% soft brush on black. I'm gonna paint over my car here. Okay, if I'm not sure what I painted over. Okay, so I'm painting over, and if you're not sure what you've painted over, backslash, and I can see it looks like I'm missing this little edge. And then I can go ahead and, backslash again. I'm gonna turn this back up. And there we go. Again, I'm gonna probably fix up these edges. I don't like, it's a little bit too much. So I'm gonna lower the opacity and maybe clean up just a little bit around here, and then proceed with my editing that I would have done anyhow. All right, and if I want to add, you know what, maybe I do want like a little bit of the motion blur here on the front. I can go ahead and add that back in. So on and so forth. I'll shrink my brush down a little, make this edge here nice and sharp. All right, so that's it for the blur. You can do this technique, same process with other types of blur. So let me go ahead and get rid of this one. Let's say I didn't want to do a motion blur. I wanted to do a different type of blur. Control J, or maybe I want to do like a zoom or something. Blur, let me show you just the lens blur, and we'll probably do this as a separate sampler. But let's open up the lens blur. The lens blur, to change the amount of blur, you can knock up this radius right here. Okay, and it will be the same process in terms of masking. So I'll go ahead and save this video, and I will post it for you, and then come around to help anyone that needs. This one's taking a little bit longer for my computer. And again, I'm going to put my layer mask up. I don't know why this got a little wonky here. And I'm going to get rid of the blur on all the areas I don't want. So for the lens blur, maybe I want to bring kind of this area into focus. Okay, and again, that just helps draw attention to your subject, basically faking either aperture, panning, or depth of field.